Greetings. Thank you for your interest in the Natural Resources Land Development Regulations update for Teton County, Wyoming. My name is Rowie Hurley. I'm project manager. Feel free to contact me by email, phone, or the website that is identified on the screen. You can reach me by email at rhurley@tetonwyo.org or by phone at 307-733-3959. The purpose of this presentation is to introduce the Natural Resources Update project and to describe the alternatives being analyzed on the natural resources subjects. Those subjects are wildlife habitat, wetlands and water bodies, wild animal feeding, environmental analyses, and wildlife-friendly fencing. What are the Natural Resources Land Development Regulations? First of all, we are directed by the Comprehensive Plan through Common Value Ecosystem Stewardship, which directs protection of our natural resources. There are 3 sections in the Land Development Regulations that implement the common values in the Comprehensive Plan. Sections 5.1, 5.2, and 8.22 address wetlands and water bodies and their buffers or setbacks, fencing, wildlife feeding, water quality, natural resources overlay, and environmental analysis. Natural Resources Update includes utilization of the new wildlife habitat map, referred to as the Focal Species Habitat Map. So why should we update the Natural Resources Land Development Regulations? As mentioned before, the Comprehensive Plan Common Value Ecosystem Stewardship directs protection of our natural resources. It also directs growth to suitable locations, and the land development regulations that implement the Comprehensive Plan have not been updated since 1994. Wildlife habitat and movement knowledge has increased, and unfortunately water quality has declined. Problem is also loss of wildlife and wildlife habitat. There's an average of more than 5,000 wildlife vehicle collisions occurring annually in Wyoming. 362 animals were killed in Teton County outside of the parks from May 2016 to April 2017, according to the Jackson Hole Daily. The conversion of rural private lands to residential development is a leading driver of the loss of biodiversity, wildlife habitat, and productive ag lands in the West. Residential development also introduces human disturbances to biological communities, such as light, noise, traffic, and domestic animals. So what is the solution to the problem? First of all, identify habitat and migration. Update the regulations to better protect identified wildlife habitat, and then direct new development to designated growth areas, cluster rural development away from sensitive resources, protect wildlife through a tiered system of protection, avoid restriction of wildlife migration routes, and promote redevelopment in growth areas, incentivize that redevelopment. The process for these solutions is an environmental analysis or environmental review. Is conducted on site. An environmental analysis verifies the wildlife habitat map or the focal species habitat map and commences the process of development planning. The process also involves county planners and other government or non-government professionals. When development or redevelopment is unavoidable, mitigation is required to offset the impacts. Another problem is declining water quality. A recent study by the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality that was conducted this past or issued this past August 2017 revealed elevated levels of E. coli in both streams, Fish Creek and Flat Creek. This impacts fisheries, upland wildlife, tourism, and employment. Solution is to manage runoff and upgrade septic systems. Stormwater runoff can be treated before it enters wetlands and water bodies or groundwater. This can be done through passive means such as buffers around wetlands and water bodies that can filter pollutants, or more active processes like man-made infiltration systems to be constructed to reduce runoff from developed impervious surfaces. In addition, septic systems can be upgraded to modern designs, or septic systems can be connected to sewer. This is where we are in the current process of updating the natural resources land development regulations. This process is part of the Engage 2017 public engagement effort. The Engage 2017 process establishes 4 phases with benchmarks at each phase. The purpose of these benchmarks is to make commitments throughout the process so that by the end, only the details are left and regulations can be written. With the hope being that this will provide a more efficient process, a better product, and a more engaged public. The Natural Resources Update includes a consultant and a Natural Resources Stakeholder Group. The Stakeholder Group is a 15-member volunteer committee made up of various professionals and residents of Teton County. And that committee was approved by the Board of County Commissioners, and they will be the primary content advisor to the Board of County Commissioners. The Natural Resources Update process, as part of the Engage 2017 process, began with the first phase, which was agree to a process. Secondly, identify the problems. During that phase, public involvement included a Spanish discussion, open house, an English discussion, and an online survey. We completed the problem identification phase in July. We are now in the identification of solution phase. With the identified issues to consider, the Board of County Commissioners committed to 11 policy questions identified on this slide. These are the questions that must be answered to update the Natural Resources Land Development Regulations. These questions are analyzed in detail, and alternative answers are provided by the technical consultant Clarion Alder in their document called Alternative Approaches, Solutions to Policy Questions. The current phase of the process is to answer the policy questions. Each policy question will be addressed individually later in this presentation through survey questions. Analysis of the alternatives is the current step in the process. This presentation is only one source of information on the alternatives. You can find a brief written description or a more detailed written description at www.engage2017.jacksontetonplan.com. Staff will also be available to answer questions by email or in person. As questions come in, we will also be updating and posting a frequently asked questions section. In terms of providing public comment, we encourage you to attend the community discussion on November 9th at 6 p.m. at the Snow King Grandview Lodge. If you cannot make that or would like to supplement that participation, an online survey to provide comment is available. Following the community discussion, the Natural Resources Stakeholder Group will make a recommendation on the policy questions to the Board of County Commissioners. Finally, the board will begin review on November 28th and make a decision on direction on December 11th. Shortly, we will ask you these 8 questions in a survey that reflect the major subjects covered in the Natural Resources Update. We are about to start on the survey questions, but it's important that we ask, what does healthy wildlife populations mean to you? Our community goal is to maintain healthy populations of all native species. What does healthy wildlife populations mean to you? This is a question about your values. That goal may mean one thing to the general public and another thing to scientists like ecologists and biologists. In setting regulations, it is important that the Board of County Commissioners understand what you and all other county residents think. The goal means to make sure the regulations address everyone's values. First question is, how should the presence of wildlife habitat affect development rights on a property? Every property has development rights associated with it. Wildlife habitat protections affect those rights by restricting allowed location and amount of development location or amount. The question is, to what extent the presence of wildlife habitat on a site alter the development rights? For reference, in the Alternatives Approach Solutions to Policy questions, the technical analysis, this subject is covered under questions 1 through 4. For this question, you can select all that apply. The first alternative answer is, it should limit the location of allowed development. In other words, for example, a setback from an eagle nest or a wetland. You may like this answer because development should have to be located in the least impactful place on the site. You may not like this question because countywide regulations already direct growth out of habitat areas, and that is enough. Second alternative answer is, it should limit the amount of allowed development, such as height or size of the structures. You may like this answer because wildlife are impacted by the amount of human activity occurring, so human activity should be limited near habitat. Conversely, you may not like this answer because zoning already limits the amount of development allowed in habitat areas, and that is enough. The next possible answer is, standards should be different in town than out in the rural parts of the county. You may like this answer because town has habitat. It is also where the community wants growth to occur. Conversely, wildlife do not recognize political boundaries. The last question, or the last answer, is standards should be more restrictive the more valuable the habitat is. Habitat that is absolutely crucial and very rare needs more protection than habitat that is abundant. You may not like this answer because relative value is a subjective determination that leads to unpredictable regulations. Next questions have to do with, why should we protect water bodies and wetlands? Rivers, creeks, streams, ponds, and wetlands have numerous functions. They are wildlife habitat, our source of clean water, beautiful scenery. They have recreational assets and corridors through town, such as Flat Creek. The next question is, why should we protect water bodies and wetlands? It's important to understand that not all of those functions can be protected in all cases. For reference, this question is related to the topics in questions 6 and 7 of the technical analysis called Alternative Approaches, Solutions to Policy Questions. You can select all that apply. So why should we protect water bodies and wetlands? First possible answer is for wildlife habitat. You might choose this answer because the community's goal is to protect wildlife and water is the most important habitat. You may not choose this question because county-wide regulations already direct growth out of habitat areas. The next reason to protect water bodies and wetlands is for water quality. Why choose this answer? Clean water is a basic requirement of healthy species. You may not like this answer because water quality protection moves development away from the water because of buffers and setbacks, and also filtration methods are costly. You may want water bodies and wetlands protected for scenic values because water is part of the iconic scenery of the community. You may not like it because it may require altering native vegetation that impacts wildlife habitat and water quality. You may want protection for recreational values, and you may choose that answer because recreation on the water is an important part of our community. You may not like it because recreation impacts wildlife habitat, water quality, and scenic values. And the last possible answer is corridors through town. You may like this answer because it provides opportunities for pedestrian and bicycle corridors through developed areas. But conversely, you may not pick this answer because it impacts wildlife habitat, water quality, and scenic values. The next question is, when is a site-specific study of natural resources needed? A site-specific study, also known as an environmental analysis, is the only way to know what natural resources actually exist on a property, but it is costly and the outcome is unpredictable for a landowner. When it comes to requiring site-specific study, the question is, when do the benefits to natural resource protection outweigh the costs to the applicant? It is also important to note when answering this question that there is publicly available information, that is maps, on vegetation and habitat county-wide. This information is accurate, it's new, but it's on a broad scale and not precise on a site-by-site basis. For this question, for more details, you can go to questions 1 through 4 in the Alternatives Approach document. For this question, you can select all that apply. Again, when is a site-specific study of natural resources needed? The first possible answer is when many habitats exist to determine which habitat is most important to protect and which can be developed. You may choose this answer because determining the appropriate location for development on site with multiple options requires a site-specific analysis. You may not like this answer because habitats can be ranked at a county-wide level. Site-specific analysis is unpredictable. Second possible answer is to ensure maximum protection of habitat that is known to be very valuable. You may pick this answer because habitat that is absolutely crucial and very rare needs maximum protection. You may not like this answer because if we already know it's very valuable, just impose protections and it's not necessary to do an analysis. The next possible answer is to determine the exact location of a resource so a buffer can be applied. An example might be a wetland delineation. You may like this answer because buffers cannot be imposed without a location, and some locations must be determined through an on-site study. You may not like this answer because delineations cannot be done year-round and can represent a major delay. You may feel that A site-specific study is required anytime development is proposed. You may like this answer because all potential impacts are identified and requirements respect site-specific conditions. Conversely, you may not like this answer because site-specific study is costly and unpredictable, and countywide data is adequate in many cases. You may feel that a site-specific study should never be used, and if you like that answer, you may like it because countywide studies are adequate to protect an ecosystem level, and site conditions can change. You may not like this answer because some impacts may go unregulated and some sites will be subject to stricter standards than fit the site. The next question is, what, if any, types of development should be allowed to impact natural resources? Some types of development are important to the community or essential to the use of the property, and imposing natural resources protections might prohibit them or part of their use. The question is whether any of the following development types should be exempt from natural resource protections to make sure those protections do not inadvertently prohibit development. For reference, this question is related to the topics in questions 8 and 9 of the technical document. For this question, you can select all that apply. Again, what, if any, types of development should be allowed to impact natural resources? The first possible answer is for flood control or other public works projects. You may choose this answer because it's important to protect public health and safety. Conversely, you may feel that public safety projects should still minimize and mitigate impacts. The next possible answer is development on land that is under conservation easements. Conservation easements generally go through a rigorous habitat analysis. You may pick this answer because conservation easements provide permanent, more restrictive, actively monitored protection. You may not like this answer because not all conservation easements are administered by the county. The next possible answer is development on grandfathered properties that are not currently subject to natural resources protection. You may choose this answer because you feel that the properties were configured prior to the protections, so the protections are more restrictive, and that we should continue our current policy with grandfathered properties. You may not pick this answer because you feel that there are a lot of properties with a lot of natural resource currently exempt. Next possible answer is exempting agricultural operations. You feel that this is a good answer because requiring agriculture to protect resources will preclude the successful operations. Also, preservation of agriculture is a community policy. You may not pick this answer because you feel that agriculture has impacts on natural resources and should not be exempt. The next possible answer is a driveway, a water line, sewer line, or power line, similar utility or access. You may like this answer because it allows basic realization of property rights. You may not like this answer because sites with natural resources should not be buildable. And the last possible answer is a development dependent on natural resources such as a boat ramp or a stream restoration project to improve spawning habitat. You may choose this answer because you feel a boat ramp cannot be set back from the river, it's dependent on water, and some uses have to have impact. You may feel that this is not a good answer because such uses should go through a variance process to balance impact and protection. The next question is, what, if any, types of impacts should require mitigation? The goal of the natural resource protections discussed in the previous questions is to avoid impacts to natural resources. When impacts do occur, mitigation can be required. Mitigation ensures that the impacted habitat or vegetation is replanted elsewhere. In other words, mitigation is replacement of lost habitat or natural resources. When newly created habitat and replanted vegetation lives, it offsets the impacts from development. But it is not always successful, and it is costly. For reference on this question, you can go to the topics in question 5 in the technical analysis. For this question, you can select all that apply. Again, what if any types of impacts should require mitigation? First possible answer is impacts to wildlife habitat. You might choose this answer because you feel that replacement of lost habitat to meet community goals is necessary. You may not pick this answer because you feel that mitigation does not always replace the impacted habitat and it is costly. Second possible answer is impacts to rivers, creeks, streams, and ponds. You may choose this answer because water quality impacts need to be mitigated to keep water clean. You may not pick that answer because you feel it is costly. Next possible answer is for impacts to wetlands. You may pick this answer because you feel that wetland functions can be replicated elsewhere and are crucial to the ecosystem. You may not pick this answer because you feel that mitigation does not always replace the impacted wetland and you feel it is costly. Next possible answer is impacts to the buffer areas around water bodies and wetlands. You may choose this answer because you feel that buffer areas provide water filtration that can't be replicated elsewhere. Conversely, you may not pick this answer because you feel the purpose of the buffer is to protect the water it surrounds. It cannot be replicated elsewhere. And the last possible answer is impacts from everyday use of a residential lot, such as tree cutting to improve views or for firewood. You may choose this question because you feel it discourages these types of everyday impacts. You may not like this answer because you feel it is difficult to enforce or costly for the county to permit, and it's costly to landowners. The next question is, should the county have a habitat restoration program to improve the success of mitigation? There is not always a place to provide required mitigation on the same property as the impact, but identifying an off-site location for restoration is costly and takes time. In addition, mitigation that is not continually cared for can die before it provides any replacement value as habitat. The question is whether county resources should be used to facilitate off-site mitigation that is monitored to ensure success, and if so, to what degree. For reference, this question addresses one of the topics in question 5 in the technical analysis document. First answer is no, developers should mitigate on-site or be responsible for coordinating off-site mitigation. Developer mitigation project usually provides more mitigation than a fee. You might not be interested in that question because you feel a mitigation project found by a developer may be less impactful or successful. The second answer is yes, the county should accept fees in lieu of mitigation and use them to fund and monitor public restoration projects. You might choose this answer because you feel that mitigation fee funds restoration that is more likely to be successful and is an identified location of high impact. You might not like this question because you feel that fees rarely provide as much mitigation because of time and processing costs and requires new county resources to implement them. The third answer is yes, the county should accept fees in lieu of mitigation and then direct those funds to the Land Trust Conservation District, Game and Fish, or some other entity for restoration projects that they are responsible for monitoring. You may like this question because you feel that mitigation fee funds restoration that is more likely to be successful and is an identified location of high impact. And also, the county does not have the staff to implement this type of mitigation. You may not be interested in this question because you feel that fees rarely provide as much mitigation because of time and costs, and that mitigation success is not in full county control. The next question is, what standards should apply when a building or other development that is already impacting a natural resource proposes expansion? Development exists that predates the current natural resources protections, but is located in areas where development should now be prohibited if it were proposed today. When these existing developments propose remodels or expansions, two questions arise. Should the presence of an existing natural resource impact affect the protections applied to the expansion? And should proposed investment in an existing site trigger a requirement to remove, lessen, or mitigate the existing impact? For further reference on this question, please see question 10 in the technical analysis document. You can select all answers that apply to this question. Again, what standards should apply when a building or other development that is already impacting a natural resource propose expansion? The first answer is, ensure the expansion does not make the existing impact worse. You may choose this answer because you believe that encourages consolidation of impact instead of new impact. You may not like this answer because it adds impact when a better location might be available. Second potential answer is, location and amount of expansion should be reviewed against current natural resource protections as if the existing impact does not exist. You may choose this answer because you feel the expansion should be subject to all standards regardless of the existing development. And you may not like this answer because an addition may have less impact than a detached expansion that meets all standards. The next possible answer is, the expansion should only be allowed if the existing building is relocated so that the original impacted natural resource can be returned to its natural state. You may agree with this answer because you feel that reinvestment should include a requirement to minimize impacts to the site. You may not like this answer because you feel that relocation and reclamation is costly and will discourage reinvestment. Third potential answer is, the expansion must be designed to lessen the existing impact. You may choose this answer because you feel that reinvestment in the existing development should include measures to reduce its impact. You may not like this question because you feel that identifying what reductions are reasonable will be subjective and may discourage reinvestment, and the impact is likely years old and was legal when it originally occurred. And last potential answer is, the expansion proposal must include mitigation for the existing impact. You might choose this answer because you feel that regardless of how the expansion is regulated, investment in the site should include mitigation. And you may not like this answer because you feel that mitigation is costly and it may discourage reinvestment, and the impact is likely years old and was legal when it occurred. Thank you again for taking this survey and for your interest. Your comments and analysis will be considered by the county in shaping the new natural resources regulations. The policy direction for these alternatives will be available by late November and will be turned into updated regulations by May of 2018. Please stay involved by coming to the community discussion November 9th at 6 o'clock at the Snow King Grandview Lodge and visiting engage2017.jacksontetonplan.com. Thank you again.